My name's Leslie. Digital Fire is the company. We are an IT department for small business, outsourced IT. And security is a really big deal these days in every part of IT. And I fully believe that it's going to be, that it's just part of computers and IT now. There used to be a time where there were cloud specialists or hardware specialists, etc. But you're not going to be able to be an IT person if you aren't going to be a security expert very shortly. So there is still a specialty right now, but and I think there'll always be some part of it that's going to be a specialty, but every IT provider is going to need to be an expert on security, just like we now need to be experts on cloud and phone systems and all this other stuff. So, all right, here we go. So what to do if you get hacked. So, yeah, just a little bit about what's going on. 600% increase since the start of the pandemic. That's some UN stats. Some Canadian specific stats is that 40%, 39% of companies were hit last year. And so this is happening to, you go to a business meeting. I mean, on this call, we've got how many people? And I mean, 40% of people would have been hacked last year. And you may not even know it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, though. Sometimes they sit and wait. And so, and of those who are hacked, 73% actually is where they succeed in encrypting all or some data. So it's pretty scary stuff out there. And the payout is going higher and higher. So the cost of cybersecurity is a lot, and it is rising. I mean, ultimately, the hackers do this because it makes them money, and it's it used to be the Nigerian prince who's going to transfer $1 million and give you 20%. In order to do that, but it's a lot more sophisticated now. The average downtime is 19 days. Imagine if your business was not able to make revenue for 19 days. How would that impact your quarterly financials, your yearly? It's a tremendous impact. So, yeah, and it is a question of when you will get hacked and to what extent. It is no longer if. We have lost the battle of will you get hacked? Can we completely prevent this? That may turn around, but as of right now, there is no prevention. There's only just mitigation of some level of attack, and how bad is it going to be, and how well are you protected, and what impact is it going to have. So that's why preparation is a really big part of this, and that's what we're going to talk about today, and specifically what to do when you get hacked. They just need to find one way in, and we got to lock all the windows and doors. So our job as business owners, and I say that because it's not IT. It is IT, but it's not just IT. It's everyone in the business has a responsibility for cybersecurity. So it's a lot easier said than done. They have to find one way in, and we have to lock all the windows and doors. So it's hard. It's hard to do. And that's why the cyber criminals are succeeding. And then how much should you spend on cybersecurity? Just a quick slide on this, that it isn't a bolt on. It isn't something you just, buy a doohickey and that's it. Yeah, the truthful answer is a bit more than everyone else. That is the answer of how much you should spend. What you don't want to be is the last water buffalo at the back of the pack, right? You want to be in the middle of the pack. If you want to be ahead of the pack, that's more expensive, but at least be in the middle of the pack. Don't be the slow, vulnerable, sick animal at the back that gets eaten. And because that's how it goes. The hackers are in this to make money. They will hack the easiest thing possible. So if you are the easiest to hack, they will hack you. So what you have to be is the second easiest thing to hack. So they hack someone else. So be in the middle of the pack. Push back a little bit. Usually these people, there are some that make the news that are very sophisticated, very advanced. The vast majority, though, are actually not. The vast majority have one trick that they go do over and over again, and they use it to make money, and they prey on the weak and the vulnerable. And if you can make it so that their one trick doesn't work on you, like they send an email, they get your credentials, they go through your email, download the data, and sell the data. That's their trick. That's an example of one trick. Or another one is where they get in, they run a program, it encrypts your data, and they ask for ransom to some sort of cryptocurrency account, right? That's another one. But very rarely are they sophisticated enough to do targeted attack and knowing your systems, and that happens. It does. But the majority of the cases are just someone trying to make a quick buck before lunch, and they're going to use you to do it. So if you can do, the minimum, or have, things like two-factor authentication, or, just a long, secure password, right? Like it's simple stuff, but you have to do it everywhere. We talked about the one window being open. You have one password 2 is the password, right? I mean, that's a please hack me sign. That's like a please come and get all my data and take it and sell it and encrypt it, right? So push back just a little bit, and they'll go hack someone else because they're looking to make a quick buck. So you just have to be a little bit harder to get at than everybody else. So how much should you spend? 0.3 to 0.5. So a third or 0.5% of your revenue should be spent on security, right? So do the math on how much revenue you make in your office, in your division, in your, in the company. That's how much you should be spending on security alone. So that doesn't include telecom or IT or the other stuff. That's just security, right? So you can do a security audit. That's a super basic audit, but it gives you like a high level overview. $1,500 to $2,500. That is not going to be an in-depth look at every system in detail type of thing, but it's a quick overview of sort of where you stand and where you should focus your efforts, because this stuff can be daunting. You can literally write a blank check and spend everything on it. You can spend all your time on it. We don't have that kind of time. Security is very complicated, but there are some basic things you can do, right? So again, we don't have to be the world's most secure organization. We have to be a little bit better than the worst, right? I mean, I'm trying to set the bar low so that it's something that's achievable, because this stuff can be daunting. The idea is just to start somewhere and keep going. And then in a year, you'll be in a better place. This is the security triangle, we call it. It's the different facets to it. We all figure that it's some technical doohickey, right? Like I install some software, I put in a firewall, etc. That's this detection part. But there's two other bits that are just as important. The human part. So we're doing that today, right? Is talking about it, bringing it out in the open, not hiding it, making a culture so that if someone says, oops, I clicked on something, that we don't get mad at them and we don't think they're stupid for doing so, that we work on humans and the types of passwords they use and whether they tend to reuse them, where they save them, for example, right? So don't put them in Notepad or Excel on your desktop, that sort of stuff. And then the last bit is controls. Does everyone need to be an administrator of this system? How are your files organized? Can everyone in the company see all of the files? Is that necessary? Is that the right way to do it? Is there, this is the sort of the least privilege. If you want to do an analogy on this, this is, well, if a robber gets into your business and they come in through a window, they're in a room. Can they, from that room, once they're in, can they get to the entire facility and move from room to room to room? Or they got into that room, and in order to get into the next room, into the hallway, they need a passcode. In order to get from the hallway to the inventory room, they need another passcode. In order to get from the hallway into accounting, they need another passcode. You might have heard of zero trust. That's another way of saying this. The idea is to isolate different systems behind passwords, so that you need to re-authenticate in order to get into those systems. And it's not just one password and you're in for everything, right? So there's things like single sign-on that can work with that, well, if you have single sign-on, then it is the password for everything. Okay, single sign-on, but let's make darn sure it's secured with two-factor authentication and other things too, so that if we do want to have some convenience as to, I got one key card that gets me into all the rooms. Okay, fine, but all the rooms do have locks, right? So they're not wide open once I get in. So controls like that. There's also things around this that are policy-based, right? So there's a significant part of this that's actually not technical IT stuff. So yeah, and then, okay. This, you're not meant to look at all the details here. It's just like, this is what, the security information officer is a really complicated role. They're tasked with everything. And how are we supposed to do this as small businesses? And well, we don't have a dedicated CISO. Security information officer. So, let's talk about incident response. Most organizations are uncomfortable with incident response. It's a super touchy subject. It's scary. It's like talking about death. Nobody really wants to acknowledge it. It'll never happen to me, except that it happened to 40% of businesses in Canada last year. So, yeah. Have you thought about what would happen if you got hacked? Your phone rings during this webinar and, one of your staff says, I can't access the server and it's giving me all these weird extensions on they don't look like Word files anymore. I don't know what happened. And so it turns out that all your stuff's been encrypted and it's actively in there and it's getting worse. You can watch it and see that the files are slowly turning into not Word and Excel icons anymore. They're turning into these weird icons, and it's actually happening right in front of your eyes, and you start freaking out. And it is completely normal to freak out at that point, but it's, what do you do? So most don't have a written out plan. Even more, most haven't practiced the plan, and then most haven't refined the plan after practicing it. So these are the things that I would encourage you to do, is to think about, write it out, and then we'll talk about some practice and some lessons learned. So in terms of Canadian actual, the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, and there is a law about reporting. So when do you have to report? Because not only is this stuff so that, you're the victim of a hack. Your business is down, your data's gone, you can't operate, and your customers are calling you that their order, whether your website is down or you can't fulfill their order, or you've got significant operational issues and risk. And then on top of that, you now have to bear the burden of possibly contacting everyone saying, hi, I'm really sorry, but your information might have been compromised in a hack, and here's what happened, right? And how do you do that? And the reputational damage, and how do you recover from that, and all those sorts of things. So the Privacy Commissioner of Canada has a website that you can go to where it talks about the real risk of significant harm. There is a section that says, when do you need to contact, and what is the threshold for contacting people? And it is where there can be a real risk of significant harm to the person whose data was taken. So if they got a health card number, if they got a driver's license number, if they got credit cards, some damage can be done with those things. If the information they got is something you could Google anyways, then it's not such a big deal, and you don't need, it may be a big deal for you, but in terms of the threshold for needing to contact customers, if the information is readily available and cannot cause, or that there's not a significant risk of harm, then you don't need to contact them. And so that's a self-assessment questionnaire. And so if you do need to contact, then you got to report it to Privacy Commissioner Canada, and then they will take it from there in terms of the next steps. Probably the next step is a forensic investigation. So forensics, we're going to talk about data and doing no harm, but forensics are going to be really important throughout this part. Is when you get hacked, is to be able to determine with certainty what happened. Because if you cannot determine with certainty what happened, they, meaning the insurance and the legal and everyone else that's involved, even law enforcement, will have to assume the worst. And in most cases, it's not the worst. Again, we're talking about most of the time where these hackers have one trick, or they're not overly sophisticated. They're very dangerous, but they're not, again, they mostly just have one trick, and then they keep using that over and over again. And if you can determine exactly what happened with certainty, so log files especially, those types of things, then you can narrow the scope of exactly what happened and the damage that was done, and then the appropriate response can be tabled in order to address exactly what happened. If you don't know what happened, then you have to assume the absolute worst, and the response is more expensive, more time consuming, much worse for you. The cure can be much worse than the actual hack, in terms of the work and the cost and the harm to your business and the reputational damage and all that sort of stuff that to be able to handle it properly. It's really, really important to have those files. So let's do a quick a checklist, right? This is just, that's it. You're looking at the checklist. That's it. So we're going to get detailed, but do no harm. Don't destroy the logs. That's the very first thing, because you can rush to just, okay, let's just restore the backup from yesterday. Just kill it, restore the backup, go, right? In doing so, are we destroying the evidence of what happened? And I'm not saying let it go, stop the hack by taking systems offline. Do that quickly, right? So if that means changing the password, if that means running over to the server and pulling the plug, if that means turning it off, if that means taking the website down, whatever that is, take the systems offline. This, usually is not someone in your office that's doing it, right? So take the internet offline. If the thing is in your office, if you're cloud, then change the password to the account or something like that, right? So you can stop it at the perimeter, but don't go and restore data immediately. Take a step back and make sure that we're not destroying data. I know I've said that 100 times, but it's really, really important. Alert and convene the incident response team. So this assumes that you have an incident response team, right? So who is going to be on your incident response team? If you were hacked right now, who would you call, right? So have that in your head, a list somewhere, right? So is that going to be insurance? Is that going to be legal? Is that going to be your operations manager? Is it going to be IT contact? All of the above? And then execute the incident response plan. So let's talk about that. So that's the super basic checklist, right? Do no harm and mitigate stop the attack in whatever way that you think or that you can. You might need advice on that. And then contact the people that need to be contacted, and then start working the problem. So you need to do a little bit of investigating initially. How bad is it? What did they get? Do we know how long they've been in there? How do we get back to normal? Is this a giant impact? Is it one user? Is it all users? then start thinking about, do we notify customers, suppliers, that sort of stuff? But don't do that yet, right? We're still early in the hack. We're not necessarily notifying people yet, but we're thinking about all those things. So here's a little bit more in-depth one. So I'm trying to give you super practical ones, and then we're going to get more detailed as we go. So this is kind of a version 2 of the checklist. That's 3 pages long. That's a little bit 3 slides long anyways. That's a little bit longer. So sound the alarm, tell management, stop the additional data loss, and then talk to legal and or insurance. And then we'll start talking about specialists and secure the premises, right? So is it a physical breach? Is it a rogue employee who went in the server room and started destroying things? Do some record keeping. When did this happen? When did you discover it? Who discovered it? Talk to the people that are on the ground that know. What did they see? Who experienced the issue, etc. And then start talking about a plan. How are we going to recover from this? What are our priorities? Do we need to talk to regulators, authorities, that sort of stuff? Do we need to involve the privacy commissioner? And then work on getting back to normal. So again, super high level checklist. So let's talk about planning. Nice little quote there. So let's prepare. So what are your high value assets? What is of value to a hacker that you have for the kind of business that you run? Do you have addresses? Do you have health cards? Do you have banking information? Do you have mortgage numbers? Do you have credit cards? Do you have, what in first names, last names, addresses, emails, passwords? How is that information stored? Where is it stored? Should you consider putting that information in a different place and treating it differently? So that, because there is a cost to security, right? If you've got reams and reams of data, but 10% of it is this high value, maybe you might consider doing something different with that 10%. Is that a system? Is that a database? Is that a CRM? Is that a server? Is that an Excel file somewhere? If you put yourself in a hacker's shoes and they want this kind of information in order to steal people's identities and make fake credit cards and buy things on Amazon and that sort of stuff, sell the information is mostly what it is, because the people that actually hack you aren't the people that charge the credit card and buy stuff on Amazon. They take the list and sell it. And that's how they make their money. The richer the information, the more it's worth, somewhere between $1 and $8 US per record, right? So if they can get 1,000 things from you or 50,000 things from you, at $1 each, that's like email addresses and passwords. But if you can add health cards and driver's licenses and bank account numbers and things, it gets more valuable. So, where are these things stored? And maybe you could treat them differently. And then, it's inconvenient maybe to get to them because it's behind a firewall. There's a VPN, there's 2-factor authentication, blah, blah, blah. There's some tech extra stuff to get to this high value information, but it's not everything. 90% of your information is on the regular server and it's totally fine. Not that it should be insecure, but to think about the kind of data you have and how it's stored. Is it better to separate those things? So, going through this might change the way you do some of the planning around IT, right? If you still have files on a server, maybe it needs to go to the cloud, but we've got reams of data, so putting it on the cloud is not practical. So we've done this for some clients where we say, so Revit files are huge and require a database. Those are, let's leave them local, but Word and Excel and that sort of thing, let's put them on the cloud. And then treat them differently because they're different types of data and people can access them, and it works. So this is interesting. It's the business impact analysis. I can throw up a quick template of it here. This doesn't have to be super complicated, but what are your most important systems? Everything was down right now. What would you work on first? Would you work on accounting first? Do you have an ERP application that orders depend on? Do you have a website where things, what would you work on first? And then what would you work on second and third and fourth? So you put these in here, and then it asks you some questions on, how important is it and who needs access? Is this an entire company thing, right? So in that time of crisis, you have very limited resources. We're all small businesses. It's extremely high pressure. Everyone's freaked out. Nerves are shot. You can't get everything back online right now. So if you have to choose, which one's coming first? Is it the server? Is it cloud? Is it email? Is it the website? Is it the ERP? What if you had the ERP but you didn't have email? What if you had Sage and QuickBooks but you didn't have email? Is email the number one thing? Maybe it is, right? The email is really important, right? But maybe email is working throughout this. So have this checklist or this business impact analysis that basically goes through and says what's really the most important thing to me, and then start there. And that way, the incident response team knows where to focus their efforts. Okay, first we're getting the email up and running. All our efforts are focused on that. Email first, because that way that allows us to do all these other things. Okay, good. Then after we get the email working, next priority is going to be the ERP system. And the ERP system is linked to the accounting system, but we'll get the accounting system up third. So I need people to be able to operate and make things and take orders from customers, et cetera. Right. So think about those types of things and the business impact. So this is just, you can Google this template, but really you can make it on the back of an envelope, right? What are the most, you probably already thought about it, just me talking about it right now. What are the most important things to you? What would you do first? And what would you do second and third and fourth in order to get back up and running if everything was down right now? So the concept of RTO and RPO, so recovery time objective and recovery point objective. So these are concepts in backup and disaster recovery, but they apply here in that think about if things were down, how long can I afford them to be down? Because the recovery time and the recovery point. So to which point, if I do backups every 24 hours, then the last point I can recover to is 24 hours ago. Is that acceptable? Right? If I do backups every hour, the last point I can recover to is the last time that, if I do it every hour on the hour or 15 after or something, right? Then but then I have to have more data and more backup stuff and a higher bandwidth in order to back them up offsite and all those things. So if I want backups every 15 minutes, that costs more than if I want backups every 24 hours or if I can live with backup once a month, right? Some stuff you might be able to live with backup once a month. Other stuff, I need it every 15 minutes, right? And the recovery time is what is my maximum tolerable downtime for this system? If this is an archive system that I only access once a month, then if it takes me 2 weeks to get it up and running, I don't really care. It's at the business impact analysis. It's at the bottom of the list. If my recovery time is like basically I can never be down with this, then my recovery time is 15 minutes or something or an hour, then that's going to be part of this sort of plan as what's that's going to be a higher business impact. It's the thing I'm going to work on first. Then it's the thing that I want to make sure is backed up really much more often than the rest of the stuff. And so that I can back it up and restore it quickly if necessary. So, okay, incident response plan. So here's a template of an incident response plan. This is just, you can Google this stuff too. But this is just an idea of what a full incident response plan looks like, right? So it's got phone numbers, and we'll talk about this one. It's a decision tree, which is kind of cool. Just to give you a super overview of what it is, it goes through some scenarios and what you should be doing. It's classifying it. It's got some, how is our data organized and where are things? Someone who joined your business a month ago should be able to pick this up to your senior management team, should be able to pick this up and run with it, right? And think about what if you're not here, right? You as the business owner, I can just handle it. I don't really need this. Yeah, but what if you're on vacation? What if you're at a trade show? What if you're, etc. And if you're on vacation, you're probably coming back, right? But in the meantime, you want people to be able to act, because they have to do it quickly, as if you had done it, right? And they would make the decisions that you would make. And so it can be quite involved to do the entire thing and plan it out and do the scenarios. But these are the general categories. So during an incident response, before and then after. Before, during, and after. So preparation, which we're talking about now, and then during is detection analysis. So figuring out what's going on, and then what do we do about it? Containment, eradication, recovery, get back up to normal, and then what have we learned from this? And there is no getting this right at the very first, kick at the can. There's no way. The incident response plan, this thing's 45 pages long, right? Holy cow. It's daunting. Start with one. Start with one page. Start with who's on my list of people I'm going to call, right? Start with that. That's your incident response plan, right? And then try it, and then think about it. And then maybe you might write some more phone numbers on there. So this is a bit more sophisticated decision tree where you can say things like, okay, so is it my entire company or is it one person, right? And if it's one person, then I can deal with it, isolate it, then it's got one way to go. If it's the entire company, now it's more serious. Okay, it's the entire company. Is it every single system in the entire company? Or is it one particular system, but it's affecting the entire company, but the rest of the systems are okay? All right, so then I go this way or I go this way. And it's like, okay, this is a full-fledged security incident now. And then, look at what other criteria are met. Have they got into where we store the credit cards? Have they encrypted stuff? Have they, so this kind of decision tree helps to think about that sort of stuff. So think about who's going to be on your team. That's the very first step. And these are the people that you want on that team. So assemble, pretend this is, you're going into battle, and these are the people you're going to be in the war room with when it happens. So you want technology in the room. So you definitely want IT, but you also want business operations, and you also want legal, and you also want communications. So I would start thinking about the insurance as well. If you don't have cyber insurance, then get cyber insurance for sure. But more than that the cyber insurance, reach out to them and start talking about what is the name of the firm that is that is going to be the lawyer that is going to respond, that you're going to communicate with when you get hacked. And who is going to be your contact at the PR firm that the insurance company uses, right? And those people are used to working together. A lot of people think that the law firm is employed by the insurance company, they're going to try to work for the insurance company, not for me. That's not the case. The law firm is employed by you. The law firm is contracted, even in these situations, to their contract, their agreement is with you. And their privilege, their attorney-client privilege, attorney is American, but their I don't know what you call that in Canada, but their privacy, their privilege is with you. It also includes the insurance company too, but they work for you. The insurance company pays for it as part of your insurance, but they do work for you. So. Steve just messaged me. Steve is an insurance broker, and he's on this call. He's happy to provide a cyber liability toolkit that will make this process easy. And he's got an exposure risk scorecard, so that's pretty cool. Maybe we can talk about that afterwards, and maybe the questions. You can reach out to Steve or in the chat if you want to. So Steve Chittick, if you want a message. So legal and communications, they're going to be used to working with each other, right? They worked on an incident last week, just like the one you're having now. It's your first time, but it's not their first time. So it's a good idea to use them. because they're used to working together. They're just going to, there's going to be less delays in engaging people. It's just going to be a smoother experience. Let the experts handle it. So these are the types of people that should be on your team. So responsibilities, who's doing what? So there's an incident response team lead. So pick somebody. Is that you? Is that someone in your company? Is that somebody external? Pick somebody. They're going to be the lead. Then you've got an IT contact, a legal representative, a communications person, and an operations person from your company. Could be people wearing multiple hats. If you're a smaller company, absolutely. But these are the roles that need to happen, right? And there's a lot of stuff here about who's actually going to send out the communication about this, right? So that's like on your Twitter account, on your LinkedIn, post on your website, send an email to clients. Clients are calling, asking about it. What's going on? What do you tell them, right? What is the communication that you give to your staff so they know what to say, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But who's on your IT team? It could be the IT company, sure, but is it anybody internal as well? Is there an office manager or something who knows the context of stuff that also needs to be? So internal and external, who's got the authority to take systems offline, right? Your website needs to be taken down and it's going to affect business, right? So who's going to make that call? What if you aren't there? So operations, who are the key people? Is it an office manager? Is it, a vice president? Is it that sort of thing? And who's going to have enough context to be able to make that decision for different departments? So legal. I use the word attorney here because it's American, but have someone that you reach out to now when you haven't been hacked yet. Establish a relationship, just like a 5-minute phone call, right? So that you aren't in your time of crisis and need, you aren't reaching out to a complete stranger to please help you when you're drowning, sort of thing. Just a little bit of a relationship with a lawyer that does this every day. And I would say it's important that it's someone that does it every day. This is not estate litigation. This is not, my wife's an immigration lawyer, but she doesn't know anything about how to respond to cyber attacks, right? And so it has to be that specific type of law. I mean, immigration, my wife's an expert. She knows everything there is to know about immigration. And if you need immigration, she's awesome. And so it's very specific, right? So, and you get the law firm and the PR firm working together, as I said. So that's really important. And the insurance company is a place to reach out for that. So go to the insurance company and ask them who they worked with on their last issue, right? And reach out to those and establish a relationship. So communication. Unfortunately, people are judged really harshly on this. You are the victim of an attack, but no one cares. No one cares about your business and you being down and all the pain that you're going. No one cares, unfortunately. They care about the fact that you are not able to service them right now, about that they cannot make phone calls, or they don't care that you are the victim at all. Then people get very angry and there's no patience, et cetera, et cetera. And so your communication with customers, with your suppliers, with all the people that are affected, is largely how you are judged. And it's largely how much money this is going to cost you, because how nice you are to people and how patient you are and how well you communicate is how they will judge you. They have no idea what you're doing or the good work you're doing or the legal or how fast you're working to recover or the fact that you haven't showered in 3 days because you've been working on this, or they don't have access to any of that information. All they know is what you post on your Twitter account or your email, or what you said on the phone. So you need someone in charge of communication. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's you wearing all the hats, but you need someone in charge of communication who's going to be patient, who's going to be very smart, and who is not going to say dumb things. Diary of the Meth. I watched, Zootopia. I don't know if you know that movie. It's a kid's movie. My kids love it. It's great. But the bunny in it, there's a turning point in the movie where the bunny is at a press conference and she says too much. And it isn't a fact that the predators are are the cause of what's going on, but she implies that and causes mass panic, and then that's the rest of the movie. So something that was said that was not true, not based on fact, causes a whole bunch of. So, for example, do not use the word breach, do not use the word hack or attack or hacker or any of those things. Say it is an IT issue. It's not an incident. It's not an attack. It's not a breach. A breach has specific legal definition. If you say that, you might be opening up a can of worms that you don't want, because you don't know. It's still potentially early in the attack or in the incident. Sorry, I just used the wrong word. There you go. That's how easy it is. It's early in the IT issue, and you don't know. Maybe this is all a false alarm. So if you say there's been a breach, right, and this is your staff, so you have to be very careful to instruct your staff on what to say, how to communicate this, because if they say the wrong things, it could open you up to liability or other things that you don't want. So interaction with the press, CBC calls, we got a report that you're down, that you've been hacked, right? Be very, very careful what you say. Regulatory authorities, law enforcement, typically law enforcement, we think of law enforcement as something you call 911 and get it. There is no, law enforcement doesn't have a 911 for this. Law enforcement for security breaches gets involved after the fact, way after the fact. When you've got logs, they want IP addresses, they want to track things down. They are investigating afterwards. So, and local law enforcement doesn't, for the most part, have this. The OPP and provincial law enforcement and the RCMP does, but anything local does not have anything sophisticated enough to handle this kind of stuff. So there is no police department, law enforcement to call to help you respond to something that happened now, that is an active incident that is happening right now. There it is. I used the wrong word again. To the active issue that's happening right now. It's an after the fact thing. It's a slow process, and it's investigation, et cetera. So the law enforcement, for the most part, unless there's an actual criminal act going on of someone walking into the server room and destroying things, that kind of stuff, it's not. Law enforcement doesn't get involved till later, and so you do insurance and legal first, and then they'll tell you when to talk to law enforcement and if that's appropriate. Regulatory authorities, that's going to be different on each one. Again, typically they're not your first call, but they're going to be down the line. But some regulatory bodies, especially financial, may want to know earlier than, say, the College of Physicians or something like that, where they would want to know, but they don't probably need to know the day of. So yeah. Communication is a really, really big deal. So you start with an incident response plan, write something down on a napkin, and then you practice. So you do a tabletop exercise. A formal tabletop exercise is a 2-day event. The first day is, and it's half tech and operations and half the legal and communication side, right? So it's very expensive. You are paying everyone to be there. You engage everyone for 2 days, and you come out of it much better prepared for how this is going to work. So you start probably with a plan that's written down on a couple sheets of paper or a few pages in Word, and then you practice, and then you come up with a scenario and you go through it, and then everyone's got their role. And along the way, you're going to stumble and figure stuff out, and then you learn a bunch of stuff, and then you write that into the incident response plan, and everyone feels much better about how you're going to respond when it actually comes time to do so. So that's the formal version. The informal version is, I think the military calls it, the law enforcement, police call it a tactical mindset. Imagine yourself in the situation right now, right? You're not practicing. You're just, it's happening right now. What do you do, right? And you can do this in an elevator while having coffee in the morning, etc. What steps would you take right now if the phone rang and you were notified of a hack? Who would you call? What would you do? Go through that in your mind. Go through that exercise in your mind. Maybe you have a 1-hour meeting with your management team on this. right? And that is a version of a tabletop exercise where you can practice it and you'll think about it and learn from it. And that incident response plan gets a little bit better when you do that. So then let's talk about some security standards. So there's 2 security standards that are emerging that are the biggest ones. There's lots of them, but CIS and NIST. So they're both out of the US, and CIS is non-governmental organization. They're not for profit, and NIST is a governmental organization associated with the US government. NIST tends to be a bit more popular in Canada. And I would say that CIS is a bit more specific. NIST has paragraph answers. CIS has yes or no checkboxes. So for things like, do you have long and complicated passwords? So is it a yes for everyone and every password? Or is it almost, but not quite? That's a no for CIS. For NIST, that same question is a paragraph answer. You write it in the paragraph. So is it automated? So if I create a new user today, is it going to force me to make a long, complicated password? And then do I report on it? Do I go back once a year and look at who's got a long and complicated password? So here's some examples of CIS controls. And do you have an inventory of assets? Do you have data protection? Do you have and they've split it up into implementation group 1 and 2 and 3. And implementation group 1 is green. So this is just the basics, but all of the ones on this slide are implementation group 1. And they are also, all of them, they're all green and orange and this turquoise color. So in other words, there's 256 controls, but that's daunting. If you just want to get it on the fairway, you start with the most important ones, which is implementation group 1. And so that's a nice little framework that CIS has that NIST doesn't, where NIST is all the questions. So CIS, and they map. So you can do implementation group 1 questions and map them over to NIST if you need to be NIST compliant for regulatory bodies and Canadian. Again, NIST tends to be a bit more favorable in Canada. So, so here's the NIST framework. So it's identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And it's a circle on purpose because you keep going. So every time you go through this, you learn a little bit more, and then you learn a little bit more, and you keep evolving the document. Living document, there it is right there. So the other thing you can do is just pay for this. So starts at about 20 grand, but you can, oh shoot, we're being attacked, call 911, right? So this is 911. So there's a team from our security provider, Sophos, that does this. We're involved as well, but there is active security response. Like, we're being hacked right now. Help, right? We haven't really prepared anything. Man, this is bad. Help. So there is a 911 team available, right? You don't really want to get to this stage. Ideally, you're dealing with it mostly internally, and then you're engaging some experts, absolutely. But this is the sort of like, I'm completely screwed, take it. And I'll pay whatever you want me to pay. Just please get my business and my life back together. And that's what this is. And so it's available 24/7. Again, starts at about 20 grand. So it's not cheap. It goes up from there. The larger the business, the larger the hack, et cetera. It goes up quickly. So it can be very expensive. This is something that we should ask insurance about. Is insurance going to cover this if we need to do it? Those are important questions to ask. So, and it's still that, so this is some stats on where does this come from? Passwords, right? So again, we talked about the plans and all this sort of stuff, but what can you do that's super just practical is 29% from here, from downloading a malicious link, 16% from a malicious attachment. Those are both passwords, right? So nearly 50% is to do with email and passwords. So have two-factor authentication and try not to click on links in email, right? So you can prevent a lot of this because that's still mostly, again, just under 50% of how this stuff happens. So think about the different scenarios, different types of attacks. Corporate account takeover is a fancy one for password, right? It means somebody's computer got hacked into, somebody's email got hacked into, they got your password and they got in and they took over the account, right? So that's the most popular. So if you're going to do one scenario, that's the scenario. Okay, Steve's account just got hacked. What do we do? They have access to it. They've had access to it for 4 days. How are we going to handle this, right? Who do we call? What do we do? Can I reset the password? Do I have access to do it, right? Is Steve an administrator? If Steve's an administrator, they didn't just get access to his account. Now they have access to the admin side of things. They potentially have access to all of the accounts. I mean, we're resetting everybody's password. Okay, so we just reset everybody's password in the whole thing. Yeah, but the ERP can't send invoices now because it had an account in order to be able to send invoices. So I just broke a bunch of stuff in doing that. I can't scan to email anymore. I'm not getting voicemails by email because the voicemail system requires the email password to be able to get in. So so all of those types of things, it could be just Steve's account got hacked, but I have to reset everything. So now I've broken the email system for the entire company in order to do that. So that's a tabletop exercise, that the scenario you should imagine on how that works, right? And you have all those people involved, the IT and the legal and the communications, so that you can, oops, I didn't know it would break the invoices. Yeah, so that so that you can try to predict that stuff. Financial fraud. Oops, I just realized that we transferred $20,000 to the wrong account. And I did that 3 days ago, and the customer just called saying they never got it and they don't know where it is. And how do I deal with this scenario? Right. So think about that. Denial of service. If you remember a few weeks ago, towards the end of September, beginning of October, there was a VoIP MS. So that was a pretty big VoIP provider, and we use them too. And a bunch of customers were down because of it. And then 2 weeks later, everyone's getting mad at VoIP MS and how terrible it is, and why is they are a terrible provider. Except 2 weeks later, IrisTel, which is much larger, used by all of the big carriers, they were down. Hundreds of thousands of businesses were down. We still have one customer that's weirdly affected by it. One of their phone numbers just doesn't work properly. That's still weirdly related to it because it never got fixed properly. So denial of service, it isn't a traditional hack in that, we think of a hack as a breach, as the attacker got in and compromised the systems, took data, took control of things, encrypted things, etc. Denial of service does not require any internal access. There's no breach. There's no guessing of passwords. They are not in the system at all. What they do is take over a whole bunch of computers on the internet and send you traffic, and they overwhelm everything. So in the case of VoIP MS and IrisTel, it's almost easier because they're public-facing systems. It's almost easier to figure out, okay, the attackers are in our system. Let's lock them out, right? Lock the password, turn off the server, and that sort of stuff. The denial of service is external computers sending a whole bunch of traffic, and now you can't tell what's traffic from a customer and what's traffic from. So this could happen to your website, for example, right? So someone launches a denial of service on your website, the website goes down but the web server is actually not down. There's nothing wrong with the web server. It's just being bombarded with a whole bunch of traffic, so it can't keep up. So you try to load the website, you're going a queue of 100,000 requests, and it never gets to it. And so the website appears down to you, but the server's fine. It's just sitting there responding to 100,000 requests, and it can't keep up. So that's what denial of service attack is. And it's very difficult to stop because, how do you mitigate? You have to then filter what's good traffic and what's bad traffic, right? How do you do that? That's not necessarily trivial. Doable. There's services that do it, Cloudflare and stuff, but it's not trivial. So this is an interesting one. If you particularly deliver a service online, if you sell things online, if customers go to your website to, a brochure site to know about what you are and what you do and who you are, that's one thing. But if they go to look at products, if they go to look at price catalogs, if they log in to do any of their stuff, then denial of service becomes a real scenario that could be valuable to tabletop. So internal bad actor is another one. So this is obviously a rogue employee or someone internally in the company who's actively trying to sabotage things or doing something bad. Right. So what would that look like? What could it be like? Could they steal information, post it on the internet? Could they sell it to a competitor? So there's particular industries that are more prone to this than others, where corporate espionage is much more of a big deal. So this may be one that you want to tabletop. So that's what I have for security, and what you should do and what you should think about. So this stuff is about us and what we do. And what I thought what I'd offer is, if you want to contact me, I can do a free pen test on the system, so that you can look at, what would it look like? What if a hacker got in to one or two computers? What information would they get? What does it look like? So I can offer to do that for free. So I think we've got 2 minutes left till 1 o'clock. If there are any questions, I can answer them. So I'll open the floor if anybody has questions. I did see some stuff in the chat, but I couldn't keep up with it. But yeah, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, hi, Les, it's Phil. I'll just ask one question. So let's say you've done your backups and you've got everything backed up properly. At the end of the day, does that still keep your information, or is the issue that they also have the information and they're going to use it?
Both, right? So, when cybersecurity was first a thing 10 years ago, it was all about your business and you recovering things. So if you have a backup, that's all I need, because who cares? Lock them out, restore, and I'm back up and running in 20 minutes, and it's like it never happened. So yes, if you have a really good backup and you have that and you're back up and running, that is half the battle to get you back up and running. But the other side of it is, what do they do with that data now? So now there's reporting requirements. If they can sell that data, are you liable because that person's identity was stolen? Could they turn around and, sue you for something because, their identity got stolen and that sort of thing? Or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just half your customers or 20% of your customers, 10% of your customers stop doing business with you because you're the reason that they got hacked, right? And so it used to be just about you yourself recovering, and a backup was enough, but it's not anymore. And so what you brought up is right, that they also have the data, and what are they going to do with that data? And that's where that whole real risk of significant harm stuff comes in, is you kind of put yourself in the shoes of the hacker to say, all right, so if I had that information that I think they got, what would I do with it? Or what damage could they do with it? And then your reaction is sort of based on that, right? So do you need to contact people and that sort of thing, right? So if they got stuff they can just Google, it's not so bad. You worry about recovering yourself, right? If they got stuff that is super personal information, then those people need to know. And there's now a legal requirement with a fine, with $100,000 fine for not letting them know. I haven't seen that fine be levied yet, right? In practice, I haven't seen that happen, but that is the legal requirement. So with the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. Good question. Yeah. Any last questions? Anyone else?
I think there's some in the chat.
Oh, is there some in the chat? Okay. So, oh boy, sorry. The best way to store passwords. Yeah, not in Word or Excel or Notepad on the desktop. I would say a password manager. So the simplest password manager is the one built into the web browsers. Chrome, Firefox, Edge, they all have them. You can save the passwords there. Wait, that's weak though. The IT guy told you to save them in the browser. What? Okay, everything is just a little bit better. So that's better than saving them in a text file, right? But one better than that is actual password manager, right? So something like Keeper or LastPass, or there's a whole bunch of password managers, and some are free for personal use. There's business ones where you can share passwords across the organization, right? So if there's one corporate account for the MailChimp or something like that, and you know the IT guy never told you to share the password, but this is like you can save it in the password manager, give a bunch of people access to it, and they don't actually see the password. You just log into MailChimp and use it because it's part of the password manager, but they never actually get to know what it is. So yeah, a password manager is great. And then you say, well, what if the password manager gets hacked? Yep, true. All of those things are right. So it's like everything's just like a little bit more secure than the next. So, but yeah, they're paid to be password managers. They're going to do a fairly decent job of keeping those passwords secure, right? And there is evidence of LastPass and Keeper both being attempted to be hacked, et cetera, and what they've done, and they publish it and that sort of thing. So yeah, levels, right? Password manager is better. If you don't want to pay for that, it's too inconvenient or something, then use the browser and just you know, not the text file on your desktop, right? Yeah. How a hack can happen through a USB. That's old school, but still totally doable. Basically, it's a file that runs on your computer, right? Any way that file will link, a USB stick, etc. You know, if I'm a hacker and I want to make money at this, because that's the whole goal, right, is to make money at it, then doing it through USB is probably not going to get me a whole lot of money because it spreads too slowly, because it requires people to move that USB around. So it's probably not the most effective way if you're trying to make a buck as a hacker. But yeah, basically the USB file, the USB carries a file, and the file can run, and then it spreads and goes from there. So yeah. Yeah. Any other questions or anything? So yeah, we're past 1 o'clock, so I do want to be conscious of everyone's time. So hopefully this has been a useful way to spend lunch and think about how you would respond to a hack and things that you would do and not do. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.